Hey, welcome to the exchange. Let's take a look at housing component inflation, basically how the cost of building a home is going up by category. So first things first, let's look at lumber future contracts. So this is July contracts for lumber. I made another video about this back in April timeframe when it was at roughly, $850, $900 or so. It did spike up in May like I thought it would, and it dropped down, dramatically since then. The peak was March 2022, trading at 1464. I mean, if you go to the 5-year chart, though, even though we crashed a lot, we are still well above historical norms right now. So looking historically, I mean, really that 450, 500 kind of range is kind of your normal trading pattern you have there, which it should fall that far. I mean, the second half of this year, basically as supply and demand kind of balance out, this price should come down over time, but again, we'll see. So these next few charts are from the FRED, which is the Federal Reserve Economic Data, but the actual data source itself is from the BLS surveys, which is the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Now, what I changed here on these charts is the y-axis up here is a percent change year over year. So basically, looking at year over year change. Look at time frame on the x-axis here. Really, the 2004 to basically present day, kind of also the financial crisis too, so you can see that as well. But this chart right here is for insulation materials, and really you can see really this last spring time frame is really when it spiked up dramatically. And so you can see that most of the charts here. Really, the spring 2021 was kind of the really inflationary fears we had. It has topped out roughly at 17, 18, 19%. Now, the actual inflation rate is still very, very high, but the rate of change of that rate is not that high right now. It is slowing down dramatically. And again, this should fall as supply and demand kind of balance out for insulation and for other commodities across the board. So this next chart is the exact same layout, but this is for gypsum. Gypsum basically your plasters, your drywalls here. What's interesting here, you actually the actual peak here is actually October 2021 at 27.9%, which is pretty, crazy. It has been falling though. I mean, steadily, almost month over month. I mean, right now we're sitting roughly at 17, basically 18%. Back in last April 2022's print. Now there is a gap here. Basically, if you were curious about that, basically we didn't collect that data from 2017 to 2019, so that's why there is a gap there too. But again, this has been falling. This is a positive sign. So I mean, just to reiterate this shows inflation is still happening. So the prices are still going up, month over month, etc. But the rate of change of that, basically price increases are dropping or slowing down overall, and that's what it's showing here. So going to the next chart here, this is actually looking at paint. This is a broader bucket, but this includes industrial and marine paint, etc. But again, this has been a massive increase. I mean, this is almost 30%. Basically, this was a peak inflation rate for March 2022. It did fall in April to 24%, but it is pretty egregious. But I mean, again, paint will be a slower thing to come down overall. But when it falls, it should fall pretty fast, hopefully, but we'll see. So the next section is actually plastic construction products. Basically, all that means is like PVC piping or fasteners, etc. Again, it is dropping too. It peaked last January at 36.7%, which is, it's just crazy. But it is falling though. So last April print, we had roughly 30% or so, which is still pretty crazy overall. But again, this is spiked up hard, so I think it might fall hard as well too as the supply chain balances out. But I mean, again, this is like this crazy inflation we have basically in plastic products. The very last chart I want to show you real fast is carpet and rugs. This is the most positive chart. So again, we saw that big spike in spring 2021. It peaked out at 8.1% last October timeframe. It is actually deflationary right now. So April printed at negative 0.64%, which basically means actual prices decreasing over time. Which again, this might continue for the near future, later this summer timeframe too. So carpet and rugs might actually be getting cheaper, basically the cost of building a house. So that'd be a very positive sign, just for home builders and for home buyers. So what's really the big so what here? You're looking on this data, and really it comes down to home builders can build more homes for cheaper because they have the actual more commodities actually in place at the right time in the right place. Also, the prices they're not deflationary yet, but they might go deflationary for a lot of these commodity categories, etc. Which, I mean, that should help most Americans because we've heard horror stories last year or so of like, mid-build price increases, mid-build contract changes, etc. I mean, it's just very, very dangerous right now to really build a home, both as a home buyer and a home builder right now. But I mean, that's really the supply side of the equation, which it should balance out a little bit faster, but the demand side's a whole separate category. So with the demand side, we are seeing interest rates increasing. I mean, roughly it's at 5.25% right now, and demand has been drawing down. I mean, it is a softening market. I made a video this month earlier about that. So, I mean, it's a very interesting topic, I think, in general. But we're seeing right now where we have demand drawdown, and supply is actually catching up just now. So that's why as prices are rolling over, starting to see some of those flips across all these various commodity categories. Now, we'll see long term what's going to happen with that, how it's going to change, though, too. But as for home builders as well, too, I mean, on their actual demand for raw materials itself, I mean, they're nervous to build as well, too, because they know, hey, if we go like an '08 style crash or bleed down, which I don't think we're going to have happen just yet, but it's one of those things where they don't want to actually, overproduce and have a low demand market where all of a sudden their house has to sell well below the actual cost, potentially at well below the cost of goods sold, where all of a sudden they're in a tight spot. And that's kind of their biggest fear they had. And that's why they're kind of slow building overall across these various markets in general, which again, that should be further deflationary price pressures across all these commodities though. But again, we'll see what's going to happen. So that's housing commodity inflation. If you like the channel overall, be sure to sub right there in the corner. Also drop your comment, kind of what your thoughts are on the real estate market in general right now, where it could go in the future. But yeah, that's the exchange.